if we actually get to that point where we have more bills to pay than Treasury has cash on hand or borrowing authority left, what would be the choices faced by the Treasury Secretary?
So I would say that, first and foremost, we would really be in uncharted territory. We truly don't know. Now, there are discussions that have happened over the past years, and as debt limit episodes have intensified, particularly over the last decade, that potentially the Treasury Department and government officials could choose to make good on some payments with the revenues that are coming in, that we could potentially prioritize our interest and principal payments on our national debt. But I really do want to emphasize that we don't quite know. There are extraordinary technical, economic, and legal challenges that would amount. But as we kind of hear the words, payment prioritization thrown out in the news and among politician talking points, it's important to kind of clarify what that could mean. So there are potentially kind of two instances where, maybe the Treasury Department could kind of enter into one of these prioritization schemes. The first is that the Treasury Department, after prioritizing and making good on our interest obligations, that they could choose which payments get paid and which do not. So maybe they prioritize Social Security and military payments over SNAP benefits and reimbursements to Medicare providers. I don't know. You can imagine that even just me trying to list off those 4 payments, could quickly become a very chaotic and unmanageable process. We also don't even know operationally how they would even make that happen. And so, the Treasury Department is looking at millions of payments that are coming in and out of the door, and it would truly become an unruly situation, and also full of legal challenges immediately, especially as if the United States is making good on its payments to foreign bondholders before making critical payments to American voters. There's also some discussion that potentially the department could instead just wait until a full day's revenue comes in and then be able to pay those bills that have come due with that revenue. So, for example, we are traditionally running deficits, meaning that day to day we're spending more than we're bringing in revenues. And so if it takes about a couple of days of revenues to come in the door to make one day's worth of payments, that's where we would see kind of a payment delay scenario where, as you look at some of these large payments that are due in June and July, that's really where we start to anticipate, okay, well, if we, if we're in a situation where we really are counting every single penny that's coming in the door and we're not able to get those bills out until we have sufficient revenues to make it on one day, those bills could get delayed a day, 3 days, even longer, and that time period would extend as the debt limit impasse draws on. So, I think that especially as we're talking about, being in this uncharted territory and, no one really knows how the government would operate. You'd be asking folks to come to work and who might not be getting paid, or there is a, uncertainty about when that payment would go out. So it's really important to emphasize that, there's so much uncertainty in such a scenario.
I think that
the challenge
from past, from past episodes, there's some speculation that the Treasury Department would be able to prioritize interest on the debt because it's run out of a separate account. But that's not, we're kind of assuming that might happen, but it's not, so far, Secretary Yellen hasn't really confirmed that. But even if that's so, you get to all the other payments that you mentioned. And, even if you had some sort of prioritization, which is not something that Treasury is set up to do right now. So I want to emphasize, as you did, that there's no process for doing that. But even if there was, you would have the programs and payments that were not prioritized would be cut substantially or delayed. I mean, as you said. So, if you're expecting a payment from the government, you may not get it, and that includes, all sorts of benefit, but it's also contractual obligations on the
Exactly.
part of the government, which they could be sued for because these are legal obligations. And so if the government is deficient on its payments, that actually ends up costing more money. And even as you said, the nature of the debt limit is such that it does not cut spending. It just means you can't borrow to pay your bills. And so the bills sort of stack up until you have enough cash coming in to pay them. But it doesn't provide a way to avoid paying them forever. So it's quite a conundrum.
It certainly is.